What if one of history's most notorious figures wasn't who we thought he was? What if the man responsible for orchestrating the Holocaust, the ultimate symbol of antisemitism, had secrets hidden deep within his own bloodline? Rumors have circulated for decades, whispers of a hidden ancestry that could turn our understanding of history on its head. Today, we're diving into one of the most controversial and mysterious claims about Adolf Hitler, the idea that he might have been secretly Jewish. Could it be a shocking twist of fate, or just another conspiracy spun from rumor and imagination? The truth, or something close to it, might surprise you. Uncertainty of Hitler's grandfather. The uncertainty surrounding the identity of Adolf Hitler's paternal grandfather has long been a subject of speculation among historians and biographers. Hitler's father, Alois Schicklgruber, was born illegitimate, and his mother, Maria Anna Schicklgruber, did not record the father's name on the baptismal certificate. Later, when Alois was legally legitimized by Johann Georg Heidler, who married Maria Anna 5 years after Alois's birth, the question of true biological paternity remained unresolved. This ambiguity left a gap in Hitler's family history that was easily exploited by those seeking to draw connections between Hitler and Jewish ancestry. The absence of definitive genealogical records, combined with the broader socio-historical context of the late 19th century, provided fertile ground for rumor and speculation. Importantly, this uncertainty was not unusual for the time. Illegitimacy was common in rural Austrian communities, and incomplete documentation was hardly exceptional. Nevertheless, in Hitler's case, the mystery surrounding his grandfather became magnified by his later prominence and by the ideological contradictions such a lineage would have implied for the leader of a regime that placed extraordinary emphasis on racial purity. The Frankenberger hypothesis. One of the most frequently cited explanations for Hitler's supposed Jewish ancestry is the so-called Frankenberger hypothesis. This theory originates from the post-war memoirs of Hans Frank, who served as Hitler's personal lawyer and later as Governor-General of occupied Poland. While imprisoned at Nuremberg, Frank alleged that during the 1930s he had been tasked by Hitler to investigate rumors of possible Jewish heritage. According to Frank, his research uncovered claims that Maria Anna Schicklgruber, Hitler's grandmother, had worked as a domestic servant in the household of a Jewish family named Frankenberger in Graz, and that she had allegedly received financial support from them after the birth of her son Alois. From this account emerged the speculation that the son of the household may have been Alois's biological father. The appeal of this hypothesis lies in its apparent ability to explain both Hitler's obsession with racial purity and his virulent antisemitism as a projection of internalized conflict. However, archival research has cast serious doubt on the plausibility of Frank's claims. There is no evidence that a Jewish family named Frankenberger lived in Graz at the time in question, as Jews were legally prohibited from residing there during much of the 18th and early 19th centuries. Moreover, the financial documents Frank referred to have never been located. Historians therefore view the Frankenberger hypothesis less as an established fact and more as a post hoc attempt, whether by Frank or by others, to impose narrative coherence on Hitler's otherwise obscure genealogy. Lack of contemporary evidence. A central problem with the claim of Hitler's supposed Jewish ancestry is the absence of any verifiable contemporary evidence to substantiate it. The Frankenberger story, for instance, rests almost entirely on Hans Frank's testimony given after the Second World War, when he was attempting to justify his own actions during the Nazi period while awaiting trial at Nuremberg. Scholars have noted that Frank's account lacks corroborating documentation, and no official records, family correspondence, or parish registers have ever indicated the presence of a Jewish family in Graz during the time of Alois Schicklgruber's birth. Indeed, legal restrictions in the Habsburg Empire made Jewish residence in that region highly improbable until decades later. The absence of such evidence strongly suggests that the theory was retroactively constructed rather than grounded in historical fact. Historiographically, this lack of evidence highlights a broader issue in the study of Hitler's life: the tension between rigorous archival research and the allure of speculative narratives that seek to explain his ideology through personal genealogy. The sheer absence of documentation has allowed myth and rumor to persist, particularly in popular literature and conspiracy-oriented discussions. From an academic standpoint, however, The absence of contemporary records must be interpreted not as confirmation of a hidden truth but rather as a strong indication that the claim itself is historically unfounded. The reliance on uncorroborated testimony decades after the fact underscores the fragility of the argument and places it outside the boundaries of credible historical scholarship. Hitler's own paranoia. Despite the lack of reliable evidence supporting claims of Jewish ancestry, Adolf Hitler himself exhibited anxiety regarding the possibility of impure lineage within his family. This concern was consistent with his obsessive focus on genealogical purity, which formed a cornerstone of Nazi racial ideology. Accounts suggest that Hitler commissioned investigations into his ancestry during the 1930s, reportedly ordering party officials and trusted confidants to scrutinize parish records and civil registries in Austria to ensure that no trace of Jewish descent could be found. Although these inquiries revealed no such connections, Hitler's decision to initiate them illustrates both the political dangers that rumors of Jewish ancestry posed to his leadership and the depth of his personal preoccupation with the matter. This paranoia can be contextualized within Hitler's broader psychological makeup. His ideology was not only an expression of political strategy but also of deeply internalized fears about contamination, degeneration, and betrayal. For a man whose power rested heavily on presenting himself as the embodiment of Aryan ideals, even the mere suggestion of Jewish heritage represented an existential threat. Consequently, Hitler sought to control his family narrative, ensuring that any ambiguities in his genealogy were concealed or reinterpreted in ways that reinforced the racial mythology he promoted. From a scholarly perspective, Hitler's genealogical anxieties reveal the fragility of the Nazi racial project. It was so heavily dependent on constructed categories of purity that even its own leader could not escape doubts about whether he himself lived up to the standards he imposed on others. The Nazi use of genealogy. The significance of genealogy within the Nazi regime cannot be overstated, as it was institutionalized through bureaucratic practices that demanded citizens prove their Aryan descent. Central to this system was the Ahnenpass, ancestral passport, a document introduced in 1933 that required individuals to trace and certify their lineage back several generations in order to demonstrate racial purity. Membership in the Nazi Party, access to certain professions, and even the right to marry were contingent upon the successful completion of this genealogical documentation. Within such a rigidly constructed system, any suggestion that Hitler himself might have been unable to meet these standards would have been profoundly destabilizing, both for his personal authority and for the ideological coherence of the regime. It is in this context that Hitler's own anxieties about his ancestry must be understood. The Nazi state not only weaponized genealogy against its perceived enemies but also transformed it into a performative marker of loyalty and racial legitimacy. That the Führer himself might not have withstood the scrutiny imposed on ordinary Germans reveals a stark contradiction at the heart of Nazi ideology. Its reliance on arbitrary and unscientific categories of race made even its highest leader potentially vulnerable. Yet, Hitler's position ensured that any inconsistencies in his family background were carefully managed and concealed. Historians have argued that the regime's genealogical apparatus functioned less as a tool of genuine racial science than as a mechanism of political and social control. In this sense, the very need for Hitler to ensure his own Aryan credentials underscores the artificial and performative nature of the racial policies he so aggressively enforced. Let's stop here for a minute. If you like this video, please give us a like, leave a comment behind, and don't forget to subscribe, since we have a new video every day. And now, let's roll back to the video. Contradiction in ideology. The possibility that Hitler may have had Jewish ancestry presents a direct contradiction to the very foundation of Nazi racial ideology. National Socialism was predicated on the belief in the superiority of the so-called Aryan race and the corresponding inferiority of Jews, who were cast as the ultimate racial and cultural enemy. Within this framework, even a fractional trace of Jewish heritage was regarded as intolerable, since Nazi racial laws defined Jewishness not by religion or cultural affiliation but by bloodline. The Nuremberg laws of 1935 institutionalized this racial definition, categorizing individuals as Jewish if they had even a single Jewish grandparent. Consequently, had Hitler himself been subject to the system he designed, the mere suspicion of a Jewish grandfather would have rendered him ineligible for party membership, let alone the position of Führer. This ideological contradiction highlights a fundamental hypocrisy at the heart of the Nazi project. While Hitler positioned himself as the archetype of racial purity, the ambiguity surrounding his genealogy exposed the arbitrary and fragile nature of Nazi racial classifications. More importantly, the possibility that Hitler might not have met his own racial criteria demonstrates how power, propaganda, and myth-making outweighed the regime's supposed commitment to rigid scientific definitions. The fact that Hitler remained unchallenged within the movement despite these rumors reveals the extent to which the cult of personality around him transcended the very laws he imposed upon the German people. From an academic perspective, this contradiction underscores the constructed, pseudoscientific character of Nazi racial ideology, which was less about consistent biological principles than about legitimizing political domination and persecution. Speculative psychological explanations. In addition to genealogical speculation, some commentators have advanced psychological interpretations to account for Hitler's virulent antisemitism, particularly in light of the rumors surrounding his ancestry. One recurrent hypothesis is that if Hitler did in fact suspect, or even merely fear, Jewish lineage within his family, his antisemitism may have been a manifestation of self-hatred or psychological projection. Such explanations, often grounded in psychoanalytic frameworks, argue that Hitler's obsessive hostility toward Jews was not solely political or ideological, but also deeply personal, stemming from an internal conflict about his own identity. By externalizing this conflict and transforming it into a totalizing worldview, Hitler could redirect personal anxieties into a broader narrative of racial struggle. Although such psychological readings are compelling in their dramatic logic, they remain speculative and are often criticized for their lack of empirical foundation. The idea of antisemitism as displaced self-hatred risks oversimplifying the complex social, political, and cultural forces that shaped Nazi ideology. Furthermore, the absence of definitive evidence that Hitler possessed Jewish ancestry undermines the plausibility of this line of interpretation. Nonetheless, the persistence of such explanations reflects a broader cultural fascination with understanding Hitler's motives through the lens of personal pathology. In this sense, speculative psychological accounts serve less as definitive historical analysis than as attempts to grapple with the enormity of his crimes by situating them within a framework of individual psychological dysfunction. DNA testing claims. In the 21st century, advances in genetic testing have introduced a new dimension to the debate over Hitler's ancestry. Journalists and researchers have attempted to analyze DNA samples from Hitler's living relatives, most notably through the study of saliva traces taken from distant family members still residing in Europe. Some of these studies have reported the presence of haplogroups more commonly associated with Jewish and North African populations, findings which were quickly sensationalized in the media as evidence of Hitler's secret Jewish heritage. These claims, however, have been met with considerable skepticism within the scholarly community. Haplogroups are broad genetic markers that indicate deep ancestral origins rather than direct, recent lineage, and they cannot be used to draw precise conclusions about an individual's immediate family background. Moreover, the methodologies employed in these journalistic investigations often fall short of the rigorous standards expected in academic genetic research. The chain of custody for the samples, the limited scope of the data, and the interpretive leaps made in associating haplogroups with specific ethnic identities all raise serious questions about reliability. Historians and geneticists alike caution against conflating genetic markers with cultural or religious categories, since Jewish identity is defined as much by religious and social dimensions as by ancestry. In this regard, the use of DNA claims to suggest that Hitler was secretly Jewish reflects a tendency toward sensationalism rather than careful scholarship. While such findings continue to capture public imagination, they add little substantive weight to the historical debate, which remains grounded in the absence of documentary evidence linking Hitler to Jewish forebears. Historians' view. The consensus among serious historians is that the evidence supporting claims of Hitler's Jewish ancestry is exceedingly weak and largely speculative. Scholarly assessments emphasize that the so-called Frankenberger hypothesis, along with other genealogical rumors, rests almost entirely on anecdotal testimony or post-war memoirs, rather than on verifiable archival records. Extensive research into church registers, civil documents, and local histories of Braunau am Inn and Graz, has failed to uncover any reliable proof that Hitler's paternal lineage included Jewish forebears. Historians such as Ian Currashaw, Joachim Fest, and Robert Payne have consistently treated these claims as implausible, noting that they are often circulated more for their sensational or ironic appeal than for their historical credibility. The persistence of the theory in popular culture and conspiracy-oriented literature underscores a broader challenge in the historiography of Hitler. The temptation to seek biographical explanations for ideological extremism. While personal history can provide insight into the development of an individual's worldview, historians caution against attributing Hitler's genocidal policies to unverified claims about his ancestry. Doing so risks oversimplifying the complex interplay of social, political, and economic factors that produced National Socialism. From an academic perspective, then, the prevailing view is that Hitler's ancestry remains unremarkable in the context of his family background, and that attempts to portray him as secretly Jewish are largely exercises in speculation rather than evidence-based historical analysis. Why the theory persists. Despite the lack of credible evidence, the theory that Hitler may have had Jewish ancestry continues to capture popular imagination and circulates widely in both print and digital media. One reason for its persistence is the dramatic irony it appears to offer. The idea that the architect of the Holocaust could himself have been of Jewish descent seems paradoxical and thus compelling to audiences seeking sensational or provocative explanations for historical events. This narrative satisfies a psychological desire to find hidden patterns or ironic justice in history, transforming complex social and political phenomena into stories with clear, if speculative, moral contours. Additionally, the theory persists because it has been repeatedly amplified in non-academic sources, including tabloids, conspiracy-oriented websites, and popular documentaries. Such media often prioritize narrative appeal over rigorous evidentiary standards, allowing rumors and anecdotal claims to gain traction even in the absence of supporting documentation. Scholars have noted that these narratives reflect broader cultural tendencies to personalize history, attributing systemic atrocities to individual contradictions or hidden secrets, rather than analyzing the broader socio-political forces at play. Consequently, while the theory continues to be discussed in public discourse, its survival owes more to the allure of irony, sensationalism, and narrative closure than to any substantive historical foundation. From an academic standpoint, its persistence highlights the tension between rigorous historiography and popular fascination with the enigmatic or scandalous aspects of historical figures. Debunking the theory. A careful examination of the available evidence leads to the conclusion that claims regarding Hitler's alleged Jewish ancestry are unfounded and lack historical credibility. Extensive archival research, including studies of parish records, civil registries, and family documents, has failed to produce any verifiable link between Hitler and Jewish forebears. The Frankenberger hypothesis, often cited as the primary basis for the claim, has been thoroughly discredited. Historical records show that no Jewish family named Frankenberger lived in Graz at the relevant time, and the anecdotal testimony supporting the theory is inconsistent and postdated by decades. Furthermore, modern genetic studies, while occasionally cited in popular media, do not provide conclusive evidence due to methodological limitations and the interpretive ambiguities of haplogroup analysis. From a historiographical perspective, the persistence of this theory illustrates more about the cultural fascination with irony and the desire for sensational explanations than about the historical realities of Hitler's life. Mainstream scholarship uniformly regards the idea that Hitler was secretly Jewish as a conspiracy theory rather than a plausible historical hypothesis. By evaluating the evidence critically, historians reaffirm that the Nazi leader's ancestry does not contain any verifiable Jewish lineage, and that his virulent antisemitism cannot be retroactively explained by supposed hidden familial connections. In conclusion, while the notion of Hitler as secretly Jewish has captured popular imagination, it remains a speculative and unfounded claim that has been repeatedly debunked through rigorous historical and genealogical research. So, after digging through rumors, genealogical mysteries, and decades of speculation, what can we really say about Hitler's ancestry? While the idea of hidden Jewish roots is tantalizing and certainly captures the imagination, the evidence simply doesn't hold up. Yet, the fact that such a theory persists tells us something about our fascination with history's hidden secrets and the stories we want to believe. In the end, whether myth or reality, the search for hidden truths reminds us that history is never just black and white, it's full of shadows, questions, and the occasional shocking possibility. Don't forget to subscribe and see you guys next week. Bye bye.